But it is to Robert Jenrick that we turn next, because I felt a little bit blindsided when, and we may listen again to these comments, when Samuel Kasumi, the former race advisor to Boris Johnson, elected to describe Robert Jenrick as potentially the most divisive figure in the country. I find him simultaneously ridiculous and hideous. You know, I think they were found to have broken the law in his dealings with a property tycoon and planning permissions. We know that he's most famous, of course, for ordering that murals in a processing centre for unaccompanied child asylum seekers be painted over, lest they derive the tiniest crumb of comfort from a picture of Mickey Mouse after they have arrived in an entirely alien country with terror and loneliness defining their every moment. So when Samuel Kasumi came out, former race advisor to Boris Johnson, remember, and described Robert Jenrick in terms, I felt a little bit blindsided. I found myself thinking maybe we should have paid a little bit more attention to what this hideous human being is up to. So today we will. And I think what I want to do is ask how it feels to be one of the entirely innocent people that Robert Jenrick is clearly trying to turn the British public against. Because he's gone full Yaxley-Lennon now in his language about hundreds of thousands of people and mass immigration. The ultimate aim of the far right, always, throughout history, is to make innocent people complicit in the crimes of guilty people. Why was there a Holocaust in the 1930s and the 1940s? Because somehow Hitler succeeded in disseminating the lie that every Jewish person in the world was somehow responsible for the financial control that he also lied about, some Jewish people exercising over the entire world economy. So the necessity of removing them all from the face of the earth was something that members of the public were persuaded to swallow. That conflation between guilty, whether actual or not, whether truly guilty or not guilty at all, that conflation between the allegedly guilty and the demonstrably innocent is the single most toxic element of extremist ideology through the ages. And Robert Jenrick has bought into it with his full chest, trying to conflate every British Pakistani in the country with the hideous scum that have undertaken the kind of crimes with which we have all been grimly familiar. Well, I say all. Everyone who's followed this story since Andrew Norfolk broke it in 2012 is grimly familiar with the details of those hideous crimes. Of course, Yaxley-Lennon makes his money by telling people who weren't aware of what had already been reported, published in the news and taken to court, that it's all some sort of cover-up, and send me money so I can continue recycling work that other people have done, or indeed endangering cases of actual child sex abusers by turning up with my video camera and pretending that I'm a journalist. Jenrick's bought into that. Make no mistake. They know what they're doing. Make no mistake. Every commentator, every pundit, every politician, every columnist, every broadcaster, every journalist knows what Andrew Norfolk has said on this subject. They know what Professor Alexis Jay has said on this subject. They know what Nazir Afzal has said on this subject. They know what the Select Committee in 2013 said, echoing in a way what Andrew Norfolk said yesterday about Sir Keir Starmer's unique place in British history when it comes to the pursuit and the prosecution of these scumbags. Unique place. As Director of Public Prosecutions, nobody could do more, and he did it. Don't take my word for it. Ask Andrew Norfolk, the man which a lot of Jenrick or Tory cheerleaders yesterday were citing as the only authority worth listening to on this issue. Well, he's embarrassed them by speaking. And again, I refer you back to the interview that he conducted with my colleagues on the Newsagents podcast yesterday. So this is it. You know, we used to do phone-ins on this programme about what it was about this certain demographic, the overrepresentation of men with a Pakistani background in this very specific type of child sexual abuse, the grooming and the raping of children. One glitch in the data which Jess Phillips referred to yesterday is that the actual ethnic apportioning, if you like, could be better. But no one ever points to the 80+% of crimes in the broader field of child sexual abuse being undertaken by people who look like me, by being undertaken by white men and often family members of the victims. But that's not entirely relevant to this conversation. What is relevant to this conversation is Jenrick talking about hundreds of thousands of migrants coming from countries and cultures that have backwards attitudes to women, conflating every single person of a certain background with the most hideous of criminals, as if because your parents came here from Lahore, you are not going to be absolutely outraged and disgusted by what these grooming gangs did. It's as if suggesting that if you grew up in Kidderminster, like I did, you wouldn't be repulsed by the actions of Jimmy Savile. Or because you grew up in Hull, you would somehow be comfortable with the decades of child sexual abuse undertaken by Catholic priests or scoutmasters or football coaches who happen to be the same colour as you or happen to have come from the same part of the globe. So Robert Jenrick has moved into a space that is historically hideous. It is in some ways it's beyond xenophobic. It's the rhetoric of conflation, the conflation of the guilty, the conflation of the depraved, the conflation of the gross with the wholly innocent on the grounds of geographical origin. Are you guilty or innocent? Well, it depends where your parents were born. Are you good or bad? Well, it depends what colour you are. Are you honest or guilty? Well, it depends whether or not you have Pakistani forebears. That's where he's gone, that's what he's done, and that's why we're talking about him today. So how does it feel? I know that one Conservative peer has called upon Jenrick to, quotes, reflect on his comments, Lord Ahmed. I think, forgive me for not knowing off the top of my head, I still haven't fully processed how many of them got handed their sandwiches wrapped in a roadmap after the last general election. But I can only imagine what some British Muslim Tory politicians of Pakistani extraction may feel about this hideous conflation. So what does it feel like to know that Robert Jenrick is talking about you? Mentioned yesterday a few individuals of British Pakistani origin who have done a hell of a lot more work in this field than Robert Jenrick ever will. Most obviously my friend Adil Ray, who made documentaries about this when the phrase child grooming gang wasn't even in public parlance. Most obviously Nazir Afzal, who I think will be joining us on the programme on Friday, who led the prosecution. And then the former Channel 4 journalist as well, Channel 4 news journalist, whose name temporarily eludes me, who was doing incredible work in this field around the same time that Andrew Norfolk was. So now you know the facts, and you won't like them, of course, if you have been persuaded by, or if you are comfortable with, or even perhaps turned on by the idea of holding all brown people responsible for the crimes of these scumbags, or all British Muslims responsible for the crimes of these scumbags, or all British Pakistanis responsible for the crimes of these scumbags. Make no mistake, some people will lap it up. Some people will love it. Some people have been buying into it for years. Even the most cursory glance at social media will show you that Islamophobia, which of course people like Jenrick don't even like the word, is rife. What's it like now to be a British Muslim? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. That's all. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you're not feeling conflated at all. Maybe when Robert Jenrick talks about the country from which your parents, your grandparents, or possibly you came here to make a life, to end up perhaps as Mayor of London. But my God, it's time they all started integrating, isn't it? Elected Mayor of London 3 times, a British Pakistani Muslim. I'm reading today about how they need to integrate more. Well, you can't get much more integrated than that. And when it was announced that Sadiq Khan was about to get a knighthood, I didn't see many people of a Robert Jenrick persuasion jumping up and down in celebration at such a wonderful example of successful integration. It's almost as if that's another massive lie as well, just like the idea that your country of origin somehow determines your complicity in hideous crimes. So what's it like when you see a man who could very easily have been leader of His Majesty's opposition talking about you and your background in terms that are explicitly and deliberately designed to make people hate you? How does it actually feel? Not all cultures are created equal, says Kemi Badenoch, the Conservative leader. We should be very careful about who is coming into this country and the scale of immigration. Pakistani men are overrepresented in those who are involved in the grooming gangs, while white Christians are overrepresented in those who are involved in the Church of England and the Catholic Church scandals. But I don't notice anybody claiming that my culture is inferior to theirs. So what does it feel like to be British and Muslim today? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Okay? That's all I want to know, because I don't think this is one of those days when I try to persuade myself that things aren't quite as bad as they look. The men who undertook these crimes are scum. Everybody in the country who didn't is entirely and wholly innocent. And yet Robert Jenrick wants you to think that somehow him over there, them over there are guilty. What does it feel like to be him over there? What does it feel like today to be them over there? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. And if you think I'm exaggerating, I'll read you a couple of the messages I'm getting at the moment from people who are desperate to live in a country where, if you're brown, you are considered to be at least inferior and at most downright dangerous.